X-Men 97 just came back with 3 episodes at once, and one of them has a scene of Storm controlling an actual solar flare that puts the animation on a level Invincible and Caped Crusader simply don't touch. And the ending of episode 3? It drops a hook that changes the scope of the entire season. Stick around for that one. 2 years of waiting, and it's finally over. Season 2 landed in a pretty unusual way. 3 episodes dropped at once, each one locked to its own timeline. The first sits in the distant future. The second drops us back in the present of 1997. The third goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. Here's the thing. Judging by the trailers, plenty of fans expected this structure to stretch out much longer, maybe 2 episodes per timeline. That's not what happened. Turns out all 3 timelines wrap up by episode 4, with the rest of the season settling into the present. And with Apocalypse as the big bad, the ceiling here is enormous, especially since the magic-themed material the trailers teased hasn't even shown up yet. That's still coming. Episode 1 opens in the present, with a quiet but important update. Trish Tilby, the news anchor, shows up with visible scarring across her face, permanent marks left over from when Bastion turned her into a Prime Sentinel back in Season 1. She reports on the X-Men's disappearance with a tone that reads neutral. But which side is she actually on now? That's a thread worth watching. Forge and Bishop have tracked down where the X-Men ended up, and they split up to chase the trail. Forge jumps to the year 3960, where Storm stranded. Bishop heads for ancient Egypt. Here's where it gets rough fast. The second Forge lands in the future, Apocalypse's robots are already on him. And yeah, these things are basically ripped straight from the T-800 in Terminator. So who shows up to bail him out? Wolverine, now running bone claws because Magneto tore the adamantium out of him at the end of Season 1. In the comics, once that adamantium's gone, Logan's healing factor starts reverting him to something more feral, more animal. There's a real chance this season leans into that. And honestly, I hope it does. The episode's called Days of Past Future, a direct nod to the classic comic arc Days of Future Past, the same story that gave 2 episodes of the original 90s show their name and later got its own movie. Here's the part worth sitting with. The time travel logic in this universe is nothing like Endgame's. Change the past here, and you change the present and future for real. You don't just spin off a parallel timeline. That was the rule in the classic series too, and Season 2 sticks to it. Now here's a twist nobody expected. Cyclops and Jean aren't alone out here in the future. The comic this episode loosely adapts, The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, only ever shows the 2 of them in this period. In the show, other X-Men are right there with them, which eats into the time Jean, Scott, and Nathan actually get together. And honestly, that's the episode's biggest flaw. The 2 of them are wearing their 80s X-Factor uniforms, straight from the comics era where Scott had to send baby Nathan into the future to save him from the techno-organic virus Mr. Sinister planted in him. But before we get to the episode's best scene, you need to know exactly who's hunting Nathan in this future. At Apocalypse's base, a mashup of ancient Egypt and full-blown cyberpunk, we watch a slaughter of mutants happening right around the villain. This is where Ozymandias shows up, an immortal follower with stone-gray skin who can animate rock itself. He's Apocalypse's recruiter and host hunter. And here's why that matters. One of the core rules of Apocalypse's mythology is that he can't hold his own body together across the ages. He constantly needs a fresh vessel. Kind of an Orochimaru situation, if you've watched Naruto. And the perfect vessel he's hunting right now? Nathan Summers. The 4 horsemen we meet each represent a different era of history, and that detail alone is genius. War is Decimus Furious, a mutant with a full Minotaur look pulled straight from ancient Rome. Pestilence is Ichisumi, a Japanese mutant who commands a swarm of insects as an extension of her own body. Death is Sanjar Javid out of ancient Persia. And Famine, the most unsettling of the 4, is Jeb Lee, a Confederate soldier who spreads disease through the beat of his own drum. 4 different eras, 1 villain spanning millennia. And with all that set up, we finally get to the moment that justified 2 years of waiting.
Jean gets a genuinely well-written scene with Nathan, teaching the kid to control his telekinesis. without letting on yet that she's his mother. It's restrained, quiet emotion. And it works because the show has the patience to let the silence actually breathe. And then that scene happens. Storm reaches out and pulls power straight from a solar flare. Think about what that actually required. To catch up with Apocalypse's slave train, the team needed a burst of energy only the sun itself could provide. So Storm reached past weather completely and grabbed the source. She even says it herself, "I control the weather, not the cosmos." Except this time, the cosmos answers anyway. A solar storm and a weather storm barely share anything besides the name, and the show uses that gap to give us something we've genuinely never seen Storm do in animation before. If there's one argument for X-Men 97 being the best superhero animation in production right now, this scene is it.
Cyclops and Jean finally tell Nathan the truth. They're his real parents. The dialogue lands well, but the direction could have held the moment a beat longer to let the weight actually settle. It's one of the rare spots where the episode's pace works against the emotion. Still, the reveal does its job fast. Fueled by it, Nathan seizes control of the techno-organic virus in his own body, disables the collar suppressing his powers, and breaks everyone free. Now, here's a fun surprise. Mid-battle against the Horsemen, Morph shapeshifts into Thor, hammer and everything, just to help even the odds. It's a blink and you'll miss it beat, but it's exactly the kind of chaotic, anything-goes cameo this show pulls off better than anyone else in the genre right now.
With the team reunited, Mother Ascani rams the runaway slave train straight into Apocalypse's citadel, aiming it at Ship, the celestial vessel buried inside. Apocalypse, without a host and seriously weakened, has no choice but to run. But the episode isn't done stacking reveals yet. Outside the wreckage, the freed slaves look to Nathan, and just like that, a rebel leader is born. You can already see the shape of the man he'll become. Inside, Ship reaches out to him directly, and the second his techno-organic arm makes contact, it reshapes itself into the sleek metal arm adult Cable wears for the rest of his life. One more thing before we move on. Mother Ascani gets revealed as Rachel Summers from the comics, yet another daughter of Scott and Jean, destined to host the Phoenix Force. Her story is genuinely tangled, full of time travel paradoxes, and the show doesn't explain a single bit of it here. That's a missed opportunity, especially in an episode built for exactly this kind of reveal. The only clue we get is the Phoenix symbol flickering across her eyes. Final score, 7.5. Solid animation, great action, just a little too rushed in the moments that needed room to breathe.
Episode 2 was the strongest of the three, and it's not hard to see why. X-Men hits hardest when it's dealing with the conflict between mutants and humans, not when it's buried in time travel mechanics. Here's the payoff. This episode leans all the way into that idea, and along the way, delivers one of the best single-character showcases in the franchise's history. It opens with a group of mutants running through the night, trying to reach the X-Mansion, only to find it wrecked and abandoned. Among them, Kid Omega, an Omega-level telepath destined to bond with the Phoenix Force down the line, hence the shirt with the symbol on it, and Penance, also known as Monet, who can shift into a red-skinned form with amplified strength and senses. Deep cuts like these prove this show isn't afraid to dig into Marvel's back catalog. And speaking of digging through the back catalog, if you want the classic comics that inspired this whole season sitting on your own shelf, we've got a curated list linked in the description and pinned comment. Grabbing anything through that link, even something totally unrelated, helps the channel out at zero extra cost here.
Jubilee's hanging out at an arcade, a direct callback to the original 90s pilot where she got chased through that exact setting by a Sentinel. Cable shows up to recruit her mid-milkshake, and that tiny detail says a lot. This is a guy from a post-apocalyptic wasteland of a future, and he's savoring every second of a world that still has milkshakes in it. She asks if the team even has a name, and this is where the show pulls one of its best directorial tricks of the whole season. Instead of answering out loud, the opening credits just restart from scratch. X-Force replaces X-Men in the title card, and it only shows the new lineup. It's unexpected, it's confident, and it just works. Sunspot's redesign pulls straight from the X-Force comics, and Psylocke strikes a pose that's a direct homage to Jim Lee's iconic art. Cable's message couldn't be clearer. This isn't a game anymore. This is a war. And the team's very first mission proves it in the most brutal way possible.
X-Force tracks down War, Decimus Furious, to Brazil, where he's apparently just been enjoying Carnival in Rio like nothing's wrong. Yes, the show leans hard into the postcard version of Brazil here, feathers and all, but the fight choreography backs it up completely. And here's the twist. It turns out to be a setup. Apocalypse used his own horsemen as bait to pull X-Force away from wherever his real plans were actually unfolding. Once they've got him cornered, Psylocke goes into his mind and pulls everything useful out of it. And then, without warning, Archangel puts him down in cold blood, on Cable's direct order. His justification lands like a gut punch. It's not murder, it's mercy. As a former horseman himself, someone who went through that exact transformation and came out the other side, Archangel genuinely believes killing someone in that condition is an act of compassion. Jubilee is floored. She didn't get the chance to stop it. The second she turned her back, the shot was already fired. This moment works so well because it uses Jubilee's decency, not to make her look naive, but to show she's the actual soul of the X-Men, stuck inside a team that runs on a completely different logic. And things are about to get a lot more complicated. Emma Frost turns up in England, running her own club. Ever since Genosha, where she went through something genuinely devastating during the Sentinel attack, she's clearly chosen to move forward the pragmatic way. It might frustrate anyone hoping to see that trauma carry more visible weight, but honestly, it's exactly consistent with Emma from the comics. She always adapts. Always. And then she sells X-Force out to X-Factor in exchange for amnesty, which kicks off a genuinely excellent fight between the two teams. This is where the animation flexes hardest all over again. That signature style of 3D storyboarding rendered in 2D just doesn't have competition right now. Stack it against Invincible, Caped Crusader, anything else out there, it's simply a different tier. Jubilee gets captured and left behind by Cable, hauled off to the helicarrier prison in Washington. And that's where the episode drops one of its deepest cuts yet, a whole cell block of young imprisoned mutants. But the best part of this episode is still coming. Jubilee makes one last appeal to Polaris's conscience, Magneto's daughter, a former X-Man who's clearly wrestling with guilt over hunting her own kind. When Polaris walks away without helping, Jubilee doesn't back down. She goes straight at Havoc, Cyclops' own brother and the guy running X-Factor. Havoc doesn't say a word back. He just stands up and walks out. And that silence, it's more humiliating than any comeback could have possibly been. This is one of the best moments in the entire animated franchise, and Jubilee earns the whole episode with a single line. Polaris eventually comes back and helps Jubilee escape. X-Force arrives for the rescue, and the whole closing sequence, Jubilee leaping off the carrier and getting caught by Sunspot, echoing a moment from Season 1, plays like a statement of values. Cable's learning from her, not the other way around. X-Force gets branded fugitives by the government afterward, and the episode frames that as a fair price to pay. Episode score 8. And Episode 3 keeps that same level going. Episode 3 is the only one of the 3 officially marked Part 1, and its wide-open ending confirms this story rolls right into Episode 4. The title, Rise of Apocalypse, is a direct nod to the comic exploring the villain's origin. But here's the twist. The premise flips the source material. The X-Men aren't watching Sabah Noor's story from the outside. They're stuck living through it, right alongside him, before he ever becomes Apocalypse. But the real subversive move in this episode is somewhere else entirely. The one trying to steer Sabah Noor toward the light isn't Professor Xavier, it's Magneto. Sit with that for a second. Magneto, the same guy who led the X-Men at the end of Season 1 after going through a real transformation, looks at ancient Egypt and sees an opportunity. Turn Apocalypse into an ally of Xavier's ideals thousands of years early, and everything downstream changes. It's the kind of wild, out-of-the-box plan only Magneto would even attempt, and that's exactly why he's such a fascinating character to build a season around. The Emperor keeping Sabah Noor enslaved in this era goes by Rama-Tut, and any comics fan clocks it instantly. Ramatut is one of the many faces of Kang the Conqueror. Here's the thing though, this isn't some invented bridge to tie the show to the MCU. The Apocalypse-Kang connection is straight out of the comics, and it even showed up in the original 90s cartoon. Still, it's impossible to ignore the timing of bringing this back, right as the multiverse dominates the rest of Marvel's output. Then there's the ship. Its origin traces back to the Celestials. Yes, the same cosmic beings from the Eternals movie. And this thing isn't fully under Apocalypse's control. It's got its own consciousness, and it's been waiting on one very specific connection. In the future, it bonds with Nathan in a way that goes way past coincidence. Back in the classic 90s series, it already crossed paths with Beast. And here, in ancient Egypt, it's the exact object Rama-Tut is desperate to control. Specifically to stop Sabah-Noor from ever reaching it and becoming Apocalypse at all. These are puzzle pieces this show's been quietly assembling for years.
One of the smartest beats in this whole episode happens fast, and it's easy to miss. Professor Xavier decides to read the mind of a captured General Logos to dig up intel on the ship. He hesitates first, brings up his own rule about never invading someone's mind without consent, and then looks the guy dead in the eye and does it anyway. The episode doesn't comment on this out loud. It doesn't have to. The scene says everything by itself. Xavier's got a moral code, and he drops it the second real pressure shows up. He's a far more human, far more flawed character than his inspirational speeches usually let on, and this season looks genuinely interested in digging into that contradiction. The mind read gives them a glimpse of the temple hiding the ship, but when the team heads back to their hideout, they run straight into Bilal's warriors, and the lie unravels completely. They've been stealing Ramatut's own technology to build a time machine behind everyone's back. Sabah-Noor feels the full weight of that betrayal. Magneto's whole plan collapses on the spot, and that's exactly when the chaos breaks loose. In the chaos that follows, Bishop finally reveals himself. He's been undercover this entire time, embedded among Sabah-Noor's own followers, and he steps in right when his teammates need backup most. Ramatut's forces and Sabah-Noor's rebels collide head-on, and just as that fight hits its peak, Ramatut tracks the group down and unleashes a weapon built from technology this era was never supposed to have. Here's where the whole season pivots. With all this interference in the past, and with Nathan Summers alive and never captured up in the future, Apocalypse makes a decision that redefines the scope of everything. He abandons the far future entirely and travels back to the 1990s, straight into the era where the X-Men are at their absolute weakest. What looked like a self-contained 3-episode time travel event just turned into a full season-length war. The episode ends on Ramatut's weapon apparently leveling the entire base, and a cliffhanger that resolves absolutely nothing, because part 2 is still coming. Compared to season 1, which pulled 9s and 10s in its opening episodes, this season's starting in 7.5 to 8 territory. That's not a step down, it's just a harder assignment. X-Men time travel stories are always tougher to pull off than stories set firmly in the present, where the mutant versus human conflict carries immediate dramatic stakes. Season 1 had that tension in literally every episode. Here, the distant future, a present-day Black Ops team, and ancient Egypt naturally create some emotional distance the earlier season didn't have to fight through. Worth knowing, Season 1 and this season were both written under showrunner Bo DeMayo, who was let go from Disney and Marvel Studios before this season even premiered. He said publicly that he'd already mapped out where Season 3 was headed. The real test for this franchise is going to be holding on to this level of quality once a new creative team takes the wheel starting next season. But even with all these threads left dangling, these 3 episodes add up to one clear promise. Apocalypse reaching the 1990s means this entire time travel structure was just the setup. The real fight hasn't even started yet, and with the magic-focused material the trailers teased still completely in reserve, this season has every chance of topping the first one. And that's the full breakdown of the first 3 episodes of X-Men 97 Season 2. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 episodes hit hardest for you? And do you actually think Magneto could have pulled off turning Apocalypse into an ally if the plan hadn't fallen apart?
If you want to dive into the comics that inspired this season, especially the Apocalypse Saga and the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, the links are in the description and pinned comment. Subscribe so you don't miss the breakdown of Episode 4. This season's just getting started, and the best part is still ahead. See you next time.